Hello and welcome back to our series about kids and money. In our first webinar, we discussed the little ones, newborn up to middle school. We answered commonly asked questions about how to approach the topic of money with children, our thoughts on allowance, and what to do with kids' money, along with 529s. You can find our first webinar on our YouTube channel or on our website, www.windwardfp.com. Today, we're back and we'll be discussing preteens and teens as we continue the conversation about raising financially responsible children. I'm Brandy Ward, an Associate Wealth Manager for Windward, and I'm joined by Daryl Tierney, a Certified Public Accountant and Certified Financial Planner, as well as Drew Osborne, a Certified Financial Planner. Financial literacy has become increasingly important, and this gets even more important as children enter their teen years. In our first webinar, we talked about allowance. Daryl, now that the kids are entering high school, is allowance still appropriate?
So I say yes. I've got a kind of and I say yes, whether they're working and have a job or not. You know, to me, if you kind of get to the end on this, what you ultimately want to do is teach kids how to earn money, and you want to teach them how to spend money wisely. You want to teach them how to save money, and depending on family values, it may also say I want to teach them how to give away money in an appropriate way. So that's kind of the end result. And you know, the way it typically progresses is once a child is out of high school or you know, entering college or starting a first job or whatever, that's when the rubber kind of hits the road in terms of them managing their money. And so so they're, in a sense, they're on their own. So my theory is this is actually kind of the golden age of when you should be teaching them. You know, so with little ones it's real basic, but this is it's more important now than ever.
That's interesting, Daryl, because I have a son who turns 15 this summer. Daughter just turned 13. And one of them just a couple weeks ago was like, how long is allowance going to go? And my wife, Lindsay, and I looked at each other and we were like, oh, we don't know. And in my head, I was like, I don't know. I don't think it'll necessarily have to stop right when you get a job, but maybe it'll be 16. But I'm glad to kind of hear your thoughts on that, because I think you're right that the biggest picture point is this is where they really get to learn the most. It's one thing when you're 5 years old and you have a bunch of quarters and nickels, you know, it's helpful to learn, but you know, this is where they're actually really getting to do it. So do you remember, when did it actually stop?
You know, so I think it goes, well, in my kid's case, it went all the way through college. They got a certain amount of money from us all the way through. And you know, what may sound a little bit radical, but the way I think about this, you know, you think about it, if you think about the end, when they're financially independent, they've got a certain amount of money coming in that has to be allocated to various expenses and things like that. So one of the ways I kind of depart maybe from a lot of people's thinking on this is most of us are spending money on behalf of the kids. You know, we might be providing them food, we're providing them clothing, we're providing them shelter or whatever. So what I feel like is an appropriate thing to do is, as the kids enter their teenage years, actually give them the money that you were going to spend on them. So if you're spending money, I don't care if it's you know, cell phone, let's say, gasoline, if you're providing some of that, whatever it may be. And you know, if a child's working, you kind of have to negotiate. Part of that is, what are they going to be responsible for? What are you going to be responsible for? But let's say you're spending a certain amount of money on clothing for them. My theory is give it to them, especially when you're first starting, when they're shoot, even as young as 12 or 13 or whatever, give them the clothing money, maybe on a monthly basis, and say, this is for you for clothing, and try to put as few rules around it as you can,
That's
but
so
there may be,
hard.
well, maybe. So it could be, you have to have this for
Yeah.
school, or you have to have a winter coat. So, and it's going to be more expensive, so we're have to pay. And then basically what you do in the early time, break it down as little as you need, as much as you need to. So let's say it's clothing, and you might say, hey, this is going to be for school clothes, this is going to be for fun clothes. You maybe break it down. But eventually, as they learn that, wow, I spent all this money on this cool pair of jeans, and that shot all my money for, I don't have anything else, till the next time or whatever.
Yeah, because I've heard about that, like all right, it's back to school shopping time. Here's kind of your allocated money, but I love that idea of trying to extend it beyond that.
Yep.
Because that's how budgeting in the real world gets, is that sometimes I need to not spend all of my money back to school because in 3 months I might need something else, like a winter coat, and
That's right.
trying to turn that light bulb on.
And so, I think what happens is at first you kind of work in small compartments and say,
Right.
here's your clothes money. This might be, I'm going to supplement your entertainment money, or maybe you don't, maybe that's them, or, whatever it may be. I think ultimately you get to the point where if, what I would, think a great end objective would be is say, okay, now we've worked you through all of these categories. Now what we're going to do is we're going to give you X number of dollars. And between your job and your X number of dollars, you're responsible for paying your car insurance, paying your cell phone bill, paying for your clothes, paying for everything they're going to have to pay for when they're on their own. But you're there to kind of supervise and make sure. So then it's not, okay, I've got $100 for clothes that I've got to make last for the month or whatever. It's like, oh man, this expense only comes up every 6 months, and I've got to be able to put money away for it. So all the things that we face are as difficult, as adults first learning to manage money. The more you can have them do that real time where they're under your roof, the better. And there's got to be some accountability, obviously, because you don't want them to make huge mistakes, but they're to catch it, and to work through it. And if savings is a part of that, maybe it's a matching program that's going to be ultimately like their 401k, mom and dad, match a certain amount. So I mean, that's kind of how I think it ought to be approached. So we said this about the younger kids. I feel like a lot of people go overboard on the earning. They want their kids to earn money. And I think that's important. There's certain things you do to earn money. But I don't think that's the exclusive thing about allowance. I think the whole idea of allowance is give them their own share of the family's money that you're spending on them anyway, and let them learn to manage it under your supervision. So there you go.
So I read this book. I kind of referred to it the last webinar as well, but it's called, it's going to be backwards on the screen, but The Opposite of Spoiled, which I'd really recommend clients to read. But one of the things they talk about in there is allowance and budgeting. And for clothes, like Daryl mentioned, how he approaches it is he sits down with his kids and says, okay, let's go through your closet and see what things you need for, you name the upcoming time frame. So they make a list, and then they say, okay, you need 4 pairs of jeans, a winter coat, some rain boots, and maybe a pair of winter shoes. The next step is talking through wants versus needs. So you need a pair of rain boots, and you could go to Walmart or Target and spend $20 on rain boots, but you want Hunter rain boots that are $120, significantly more expensive. And walking through with your budget, like Daryl mentioned, if they give the kids a lump sum of money, the kids have to weigh, well, if I want these really expensive rain boots, I'm going to have to get cheaper jeans so that I can still get everything on my list, but I get the rain boots I really want. So it helps them think through staying on budget and doing some choices of what they think it's worth spending more money on, which I think is good.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And it over time probably helps them learn through the experience of, oh man, that wasn't totally worth it. And it's better to get more expensive of these things. Those are lessons I learned still as an adult.
Exactly.
Well, you know, and I think one of the things that occurs to me is, even as they start working, have them responsible also for something that is not fun, you know, something that's like a necessity. I need this, you know, whether it's, you know, books at school, or if it's, you know, whatever it may be, part payment for their cell phone or their gasoline, or they've got to cover car insurance or whatever it may be. Because I think it's important for them to, you know, so as opposed to just having them have their money for fun money, you know.
So as kids are earning money, and we'll talk about the first job here in a little bit, but as kids are getting more money, whether it be through allowance or a job, we often get the question from clients about banking. So debit cards, credit cards, how do you guys think about those things with preteens and teens?
Preteens and teens, in my book, credit cards are off the table. It's not the time yet to start messing around with credit. There is, both of my kids, they, well, I have 3 kids, but the 2 older kids, they're like, whoa, a debit card? They think there's like some like magic and aura around it. And so they don't have that yet, but that's going to be kind of the next step that I know I'm about ready to go through with our kiddos. They currently have savings accounts, but we anticipate that that'll be a way that they can utilize, especially as they start driving and paying for things, and having the opportunity to learn, okay, there's money in the bank, and when I don't have cash and use this card, it can be easy for lots of people, including me, to not totally know exactly what's in there. And if I just do a swipe, I get whatever the thing is. It's magic. I love, Daryl, how you framed being able to let them learn with your supervision. Feels like the exact same thing here. So I'm pro having them get debit cards, but it seems like there's some good opportunities for education and learning. And
yeah, you know, I agree with all that, and you know, to me, the progression is cash, then debit cards, then credit cards. And you know, the beauty of cash is it's a finite resource. You know, you don't have it. So, you know, you run out when that envelope is empty, you know, or your wallet's empty, you're done, you know. Well, with a debit card, you have to, that adds an additional step. You've got to check your balance, and you have to know what your balance is. You have to manage that. And so I think that's really important, you know, is to teach them that while they're under your roof, while they're under your supervision. You don't want them learning that, you know, when they're a freshman in college away from home, you know, and a lot of kids did, you know, a lot of kids do. So that's kind of the next logical progression. If they get that, then the tougher one is, okay, now I can have a credit card and I can spend, you know, I've got a limit that's way higher than what I can probably pay down in a month. How do I manage myself to keep that balance down to something I can pay off? And so to me, that's the logical progression. And you don't move on unless you've had a lot of experience watching them manage cash. And if they're good at cash, then that's the appropriate time to think about debit cards. But I wouldn't do it until they get that mastered, because man, it's gonna be bad.
And I know, Brandy, you have some good stories talking about those steps of credit cards. The comment I was just going to say really quickly was, there are probably options at your bank in how you decide with a debit card what happens when the balance gets low or to zero or below zero. And it applies for adults as well as likely these accounts that, you know, banks are notorious for having overdraft fees and that kind of thing. But just a little reminder, check to see what the options are and what would be the best fit for you. I really don't like fees, so I would rather most of the time probably see a kid have a payment get rejected than have a $15 overdraft fee or whatever. So just a quick comment.
Yeah, the things a teaser for webinar number 3 is I'll share my personal experience with credit cards as a freshman in college, because that's where they get you. And so I'll share my personal funny experience then. But for the debit
and really, I would say for this age, I think credit cards are off the table. I mean, for when we're talking about high school and stuff, they don't need, you know, one, they're not going to be able to legally, I don't think, get a credit card in their name. It would be on mom and dad's card. I don't think they need that. I think keep them with debit cards, and you know, that's going to be learning enough.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that when the debit card is introduced is the perfect time to introduce as well how to reconcile your checkbook. I am so surprised how few people know how to do that anymore. It's kind of a lost art, and I might be an old soul, but it's still very important to know how to do that and to introduce a budget. We have several budget types we really like, but the budget becomes really important once there's a debit card involved and you're not dealing with cash, because it is so easy to see that card as just a swipe. So I think a budget.
That's a great point, because learning to work with a budget, you know, takes a while. And so I think most people really start, the rubber hits the road for most people when they're away at college and they're, you know, having to deal with it then. I think that is certainly something, I agree totally, Brandy, that marry that to the debit card use and get it at a younger age, you know. So if you can have a year or two, and that's why they, you know, when I talk about them having these multiple expenses, I would love to see, you know, they get X number of dollars. They're responsible for their car insurance, their clothes, or whatever it may be. You know, this is your share of the family's money plus what you earn. And they're, by the time they graduate from high school, they're juggling it and they understand and they're budgeting. And it can't be just monthly stuff that you need to think, you know, maybe it's, you know, we all take our kids out and have them buy Christmas presents for mom or dad or grandparents or whatever. Have them responsible for their part of Christmas. Give them that money all year round, you know, and so that at the end of the year they've got to deal with, okay, did you save money? You know, have you got your Christmas fund? So yeah, those are great, and it all ties into budgeting.
Yeah, same with car insurance. If you want your children to be responsible for funding that, semi-annual car insurance is a really easy thing to make kids save monthly for, even though the payment only comes out every 6 months, which is another good example. So we're talking about spending money. What about investing money or saving money? What are your approaches there with teens?
You know, I think it's a great time to start an emergency fund. You know, whatever they, you know, instead of quote unquote savings, is if you're going to turn them loose on, you know, go with the theory that they're responsible for a certain number of expenses. I don't think it hurts to have them have some kind of emergency fund for something that comes up, so that they understand, okay, and it doesn't have to be a full, here's 3 months of what I get, you know, and I'm responsible because my, you know, whatever it may be. But I think get them to have the experience of that you need kind of a rainy day fund for what you haven't planned on. I think that's really good. And then right into, you know, I think part of the money management process should be saving. Once that's taken care of, then I think it becomes investing and teaching. And, you know, I think there's a lot of ways you can go on how to teach them how to invest, but I think it's really good.
Yeah, I love that approach, and I would have skipped just from saving into investing, but I really haven't thought about teenage emergency fund. I love that. I want to think through that and ask my kids what that could be. So the investing, one just big picture thing that I think about in my own circumstances up to this point, how I have dealt with investing with them is to say, hey, part of the money that you get with allowance, part of the money that you get with jobs that you do goes towards investing. And that has primarily meant towards your college savings. You're investing towards your college savings. But I'm really interested now as they are teenagers and this is just how Lindsay and I are thinking about it, is saying, we're going to keep doing this college savings thing, which I know we're not really talking about, but I want to flip their focus to being like, I want you to think about investing in your future self, in your future financial freedom, in that way. So it's going to flip for me, where for them, they aren't having to can do all of those contributions just to their education. But they could do it towards their long-term future. And so, you know, I think we'll kind of get into some specifics here in a bit, if that's a Roth IRA or if that's just an investment account or whatever the heck it's going to be. But I want them to see and live out and experience the power of compounding interest. That's what I want, because I have yet to find a person that we've worked with and other people who've said, gosh, I just really wish I would have started saving later. I haven't found anyone to say that. Because if they've been able to get to that step, and that the earlier they've started, they can just a lot of times just smile and be like, man, this is nuts. How did that grow into this? Young clients that we have or older clients that we have, we just, as a people, as human beings, we just can't easily comprehend how powerful compounding interest is. You know, you say, and I just Googled this to the side, but you ask a person, what's a penny doubled every day for 30 days worth? And you ask a kid that, you ask an adult that. I was asking myself, and then I just Googled it to see if I was close. In my head, I was like, I think it's somewhere around $3 million. 30 days, it's $5.3 million. It's $5.3 million. At day 27, it's only $671,000. But that compounding power over time is so strong, which just incentivizes the sooner that you can start, the better. So I'm super excited about this.
I agree with that. You know, and I think what ties into that, Drew, is, you know, when you're trying to teach them how to spend, I think a lot of people get really short-term focused. It's like, this money's got to last you for this week.
Yeah.
You know, by the way, I'm an advocate of monthly allowance rather than weekly as they get older, you know, so that they can run out a month and see what that's like.
Yeah.
But boy, if you could tie in something that is a really long-term goal, and, you know, so it may be starting with a car fund or something for a younger kid, but it could be hey, look, you know, I think it'd be really nice for you to have a really nice trip after you graduate from college, you know, and I want you to be thinking about where you want to go. You know, I'm talking to kids, maybe your kid's age, Drew, you know, 15, 16-year-olds, and say, let's figure out how much we have to put away to take a nice trip, where you might want to go, and how we'd invest it and things like that. So just really get them working on long-term goals and short-term goals. And a trip may be a bad idea, but boy, you know, because that's part of learning to spend and save, you know. And what do you do with the money? We'd say, you know, if we're putting away for a car next year, it probably needs to be in a savings account. But if it's a longer term goal, let's get a little wind at our back with stock market type returns and things like that and learn about that. So, and what it means when your account's down, you know, 2 years into it, but you know what? We don't need it for another 7 years, so we're okay. So I think those are great lessons.
So this doesn't really lend itself to the long-term savings goal, but I was recently watching a Hulu documentary on GameStop, and one of the people they were interviewing was this mother and her son, and she said, you know, I really want to introduce my son to the stock market. So I let him pick the company. And this was like mid 2020. And he picked GameStop because he loves video games. And so I bought him 10 shares of GameStop or something because it was so cheap. And she said, I wanted him to see what the power of, you know, the long term is and how that could grow over time. And they're laughing because they know the end of this story. By January, his investment in GameStop went very well. So his mom interjected and made him sell. But it did teach him a really interesting lesson about the stock market. Definitely one that she did not see coming, but kind of fun. So she bought him those shares of stock for him to watch. Do you guys have any experience, or would you recommend doing that for kids?
I love it. We've talked about this with younger kids, but this is one case where I believe buying individual stocks, exactly what she did, is the supreme kind of teaching lesson, because you can physically walk into the store, you know, you like things from there, you know, all that, and you understand that a stock is not a piece of paper or an electronic blip that goes up and down. It's an part ownership of a business. And I will tell you this, the most difficulty we have working with adults is they lose that connection. They don't understand, you know, when the stock market falls by 50% because of some terrible event, you know, sometimes the best advice is to say, go and walk into Walmart or walk into McDonald's and realize this business is probably not worth less half of what it was a week ago. You know, that's the crowd mentality and all that. So I'm totally on board with that. I love that idea.
That's good perspective, and being able to connect that investing in a stock is investing in a company, and helping with that framework. I have some concerns with having a kid pick out an individual stock for a couple reasons. Like, let's say in the GameStop example, this kid, whatever he did, 100 times his earnings, he might think he's an awesome stock picker. And again, maybe not the worst lesson in the world, but we can see examples of this for adults, that, you know, there can be this bias to say, oh, wow, I'm really good at doing this. I can take concentrated bets and be able to beat the market. I think that's a dangerous thing to maybe be your first experience. And the flip side, if you have a really bad experience, if he had bought his GameStop in January of 2021 and it got cut by, you know, whatever it is, 50-75% within a week, he may say, what, owning companies is nuts. This is a terrible idea, and have a bias against the stock market, you know. So I don't know, it maybe is taking too high of an approach, but I know that it's like the greatest time in the history of the world to be an investor. You can invest in a simple exchange traded fund or mutual fund for like $100 and have a slice of like 6,000 of the best companies of the world. It loses, you know, some of that true tangibleness, but what it does is teach about diversification, and provides the opportunity to say, hey, let's think about what the goal is and then the time horizon for the goal and match whatever the investment's going to be. So if it is a 10-year goal, a stock or the stock market's appropriate. But it kind of also fits with kind of my frustration with the like stock market game. You know, hey, in your personal finance class, pick stocks for a month and see who's the winner. What? Stocks are supposed to be a 10-year game. Why are we trying to figure out who can win in a month? All right, that's my rant.
Yeah, you know, and my pushback on that would just be that those are the ideal lessons. So if they put the money in and it falls in half, what a great, there's no better way to teach somebody diversification, you know, and if it goes up, you know, through the roof and they make money, you know, there's a lesson there, and you're gonna have to work with them on it. But believe me, I'd rather have them learn it as a high schooler while you've got some input versus learning it with a lot of money as an adult.
Yeah.
I think one happy medium as well could be to have the child pick their favorite 5 or 10 funds, because the odds that all 10 funds go through the roof or all plummet is pretty slim. So you have the opportunity to say, gosh, this fund did really well and this one didn't at all. Good thing you have both to level the ride.
And that's a great point, because we see clients like that who were like, oh geez, I picked Apple when I was in college, and I picked Chipotle when I was in college, and I picked an energy company in college. And they're like, man, sure got lucky on Apple. Chipotle still's doing okay, and whoops, energy has been really bad for me. And they got all those lessons all in one, you know, basket.
So I think the main point here is just getting kids involved in the process, whether it be budgeting, investing, all of those things. So speaking of the being involved in the process, let's talk about the first car. Getting your own set of wheels is sure exciting as a teenager, but very nerve-wracking as a parent. You can see Drew's boys on the left on this photo and my son on the right. I don't know about Drew, but I'm already nervous for the day my little man drives something larger than his gator in this picture. As nerve-wracking as it can be, it's also a good opportunity for kids to show responsibility and cut down on the parent chauffeur time. So how do we get the kid to their first car? How much do you spend? How do you tile it? What about insurance? Our clients have lots of questions about this topic. So I'll start by asking Drew, how would you answer the question, what is an appropriate amount to spend on that first car?
Yeah, there's no obvious perfect answer, but the important things that have helped me frame my own car buying decision, and then when thinking about it for adolescents, is to say, what is the priority? What are you wanting to really focus on with a car for your kid? And absolutely the number one thing has to be safety. And then the number two thing is, for me, and I would think for a lot of people, is reliability. So knowing that they are learning, knowing that their brains aren't fully developed, knowing that cars are giant, amazing things that are also incredibly dangerous, that I really want to do what I can to provide as safe of a vehicle at the most reasonable cost, because we know it's just so expensive for an adolescent to drive, because they're learning and they're likely going to make mistakes. And if you've ever been in a high school parking lot, it's might as well be bumper cars in there. So, you know, there's not a necessarily right amount. It's also a really weird time, you know, here we are in May of 2021 to buy a used car, because the used car market's kind of weird as a partial, I don't know, domino of cars and COVID and pent up demand. But I want to balance the safety piece, because the newer a car is, the more safety features it has. So I want to get as new of a car as I possibly can, while keeping the cost as low as I possibly can. I don't want to pick the cheapest, oldest car, but I don't want to spend a whole lot on a car, you know. So it's going to depend on the family budget, right? But gosh, I absolutely think there are very, very, very few reasons why an adolescent needs a new car or even close to a new used car. I want to spend less than $10,000. I want to spend likely less than $5,000 for a car. The ideal situation for us was to say, hey, do we have any family cars that we can transition when they get to about that range, because we know the reliability and, you know, we know more about the car. The minivan in the picture here, probably not quite ready, and I don't know how excited the son would be to have a minivan, but it would probably be safer for him. So I love the idea of saying, hey, can we keep the cost below 10,000 if possible?
A great tip on picking up cars for kids is keep an eye on nursing homes. You know, because
I
a
love
lot of
that.
times they've got really low mileage cars that are usually pretty old, you know, and they come on the market. So it's a great tip for picking up cars for kids. Hey, how do you feel about siblings sharing a car?
Well, as a sibling, that sounds miserable.
I wonder, because my brother, his first car, it was an understanding that he was going to have to share it with me, and we shared it for maybe. So he's 3 years older. So, you know, of course, when he's 19 and sharing a car with his 16-year-old brother, that lasted about 3 months before he went out and bought his own car. And I have my own then. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And I guess I haven't seen a lot of true, like, deeper statistics, but in my pulse around adolescence, and my wife works with adolescents, and it seems like there are a higher percentage of students that are not as quickly going to get their license, and some are like, yeah, I don't even know if I want to drive, and I don't know what's all necessarily behind that, but yeah, we have our oldest son and daughter are only 20 months apart in age, and we've kind of hinted that there may be some sharing involved. Yeah, so I'm intrigued and interested in it, especially while they're both still like in high school together. If one's going off to college, that will change the ball game. But you know, Brandy, you asked some other good questions in there about like titling and insurance and taxes. I have a couple thoughts, but I'll let you all weigh in if you want to jump at that.
Well, I'll just first add to the budgeting for the car and sharing car. We say this all the time with college savings versus retirement savings, but putting your own oxygen max on first. If the alternative to going into debt is having kids in close age share a car or something along those lines, we're all for it. If your kids share a car and you can avoid going into debt because you can afford one car, that's great. So cash is king, you know.
good point. Well, and I also think, you know, a lot of people, it's flips a switch as soon as they're driving age, they should have a car. And I'm not so sure it hurts to delay that, you know. Say you get a car your whatever, you know, your senior year, you know, or something. And obviously that depends on personal circumstances and transportation needs and all kinds of things. But
Well, and it all kind of, you know, goes into, you know, how are you thinking about how it gets paid, who's going to do it, and the more that it doesn't even need to be solved yet. But I've like planted that seed with Eli, like, boy, Eli, you know, we've talked about you being able to contribute possibly like $1,000 towards your first car. You're about a year away from that. How are you going to start building up $1,000? And I've just let that hang out there for him. And I said, if you did 50 lawns and put $10 each time towards that car, that would get you to 1,000, but man, that's a lot. And I don't know if you like to set aside that much money because you like to go to Hy-Vee and buy donuts. So I haven't tried to solve it for him yet, but I'm wanting to plant that seed so that when he's a month away from 16, we're not all stuck saying, oh, what are we going to do? And man, I want to avoid a car loan on a used, beat up kid car as much as I possibly can. I want to avoid that.
Right.
Yeah. So, I think that transitions good into how to title a car. We get that question a lot as kids start driving. And, well, I did some reading on this ahead of this, but what do you guys think?
Well,
It's like
I'm not a lawyer, but can a minor actually take legal title?
it's by state, right? And most states tend to say you need to be an adult, whatever that age is in the state, unless there's extenuating circumstances, like if you've been
Yeah.
emancipated kid or something. But yeah, again, I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, what I've read is the titling of the car would be an issue, but also the insurance on a car would be very difficult to get. So before they're 18 years old, it would be very challenging to get a policy in their own name. So the parent's going to have to help with the insurance. And then once the child turns 18, titling the car and how to insure the car become a different animal. But I think when they first start driving, it has to at least be in the parent's name.
Yeah.
You guys agree?
Yep.
And mom and dad, if you haven't thought about an umbrella policy, it's a good time to have an umbrella policy, but also be aware you may be precluded from having teenagers' automobiles on that policy because it's a higher risk from the insurance company standpoint. So I'll never forget, we got denied an umbrella policy because I had the radio show when Windward did our radio show, because from an insurance company standpoint, that's a high risk deal. That I might say something and one of the things they have to cover is libel, and obviously they didn't listen to our radio show.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
My last comment on taxes and insurance, again, kind of falls back to, hey, how do you want to think about that being paid? And you've already mentioned a couple different thoughts about it, especially if it's set on a schedule of every 6 months being paid, and how can you help people analyze it? It also would be an interesting thing to say, hey, our insurance company will let you pay monthly, but you're going to have to pay more over the course of a year, over the course of 6 months. Here's how that works. Which would you prefer to do? And kind of let them be able to make the decision on that. But I am grateful, part of the deal that Steve Osborne, my dad, had and my mom had for me was that the deal was, in high school, I'm responsible for a third of the car expenses, a third of the insurance, a third of the taxes, a third of the gas, so to speak. And then when I got to college, I'm responsible for 2/3 of it. And then after that, I'm on my own. So it was kind of a graduating
That's a great idea.
schedule. And so that was just a good way, it all kind of fits how it's all going to tie together, I guess, because I didn't get like as big of an allowance. You could just let the allowance kind of play in for that, who's going to pay, how's it going to be. But that was helpful for me. It made me think about it throughout the year and learn about what the heck personal property taxes even were.
Yeah, those are just such great lessons to have to go through and do that. So my dad had done bookkeeping. We didn't talk about this. He made me do my own tax return.
That was the start.
Yeah. So here I was. I think I was 15 or 16. I was doing it by hand and trying to read the instructions.
Oh my gosh,
So,
that's funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So moving on to the first job, once kids start driving, they might start thinking about how they're going to pay for all that gas. There's a few teaching opportunities with finances surrounding that first job that we thought we'd spend a few minutes talking about. Up until now, I've used Drew and I's children as models for this, the visuals in this webinar, but none of them have started their first job yet. So instead, I had to pull out a photo my grandma took of me when she visited our Overland Park office. She was so excited to see where I was working at as an intern in 2013. This wasn't my first job. I was actually a junior in college then, but it seemed pretty fitting. So I'll start with a question for Daryl. How are high school jobs appropriate?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think even before high school, there's babysitting, there's lawn cutting, there's all kinds of things. But boy, I really think, if at all possible, when you're 16, it's great to have a job, some kind of a part-time job, working for a non-family member. So you've got somebody outside that, you're really responsible for doing a good job, whether it's working in a fast food restaurant, whatever it may be. I think those are good. You have to balance it, and I'm sure school is much more of a pressure situation than it was back when I was working part-time. So you have to balance it with that. How much is appropriate to get some hours in. But I think that experience is invaluable. So I'm a big advocate for kids working, just for what they learn.
Yeah, it's such a great opportunity for interacting with other people and learning there's a lot of lessons involved that aren't even directly tied to money. Being responsible for something and getting, as a parent, to be step back but kind of supervise them in their work. But also, things are weird and different. There are some kids that are so involved in so many activities that it's just not realistic to pull off a job. We see that with some clients, and there's no one right way to do it. It doesn't have to be a job. In some respects, some of their activities almost kind of become a job, with the pros and the cons of that. And so, it doesn't have to fit into one specific narrative. But man, it's pretty fun. Eli is so excited that a lot more opportunities are available once you turn 15, and he is going to work at a
donut shop.
Well, he would. Except I don't think he wants to get up that early. At an athletic complex at the concession stand, right?
Oh, nice.
So yeah, maybe no donuts, but there's probably other things. But we know the kind of coordinator of it, and we're just talking to them, and they just said to Lindsay just the other night, like, I cannot believe you had Eli directly contact us. I can't tell you how many parents I talk to, and I don't even talk to the kids. And thank you for just letting him, experience the awkwardness and the part of that. So
that is so great. Yeah, I can imagine. I can only imagine. That's such a great lesson.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I also think part-time jobs are great. I will say they are correlated with high college expectations and good grade point averages, as long as kids aren't working, 40-hour weeks. There's some ballpark around 15 hours per week, but I think that really depends on, like Drew mentioned, what their extracurricular activities look like. And the other thing I'll just point out is we are in such a competitive education environment that I think some parents think, well, I don't want my kids to be working because they have to be studying, and I don't want them to fall behind in school, which is a valid concern. But I will say it's not a zero-sum trade-off. So if they have a job, they can still study, because there are plenty of other hours in the day that they're hanging out with friends and playing on their phones. So having a job can promote time management skills. If they know have a test tomorrow and they work from 5 to 7, they're going to have to study before their job or after their job. So I think it's good to promote time management.
I think that's great. And, I don't know, but I would suspect as overscheduled as kids are, I would think they would be in for a rude awakening when they go away to college. And it's just like, hey,
Yeah.
you can go to class, not go to class, you study when you want to, you do, and so that may be the first time that they've had totally unscheduled, they've got to figure out what to do. So learning to budget time and only got this much time to be with my friends because I got to work and do this and that. I think those are great. Those probably to me are a positive for in the working category. Maybe what you need to do is look at some of the extracurricular stuff and say, are they getting the same valuable lessons out of this as they are, working part-time? Because it's something, there's no substitute for it, I don't think.
I totally agree. A couple other things I'll just touch on that are good for a part-time job. So it also promotes good work ethic, which, you can make the argument that there are lots of extracurricular activities that do the same thing, but when your job is on the line for a good work ethic, that is helpful. And it also gives you an opportunity to show for your children to learn things like the importance of showing up on time. Just like Drew's son's experience, talking to future employers, going through the interview process, those are experiences that are invaluable, especially before they head off to college. I think they're great.
One other thing that comes to mind that, this probably, I think about this maybe because I've been self-employed since I was 25, but what I think is a great thing to do with a kid is, perhaps set them up in a business. We talked, Brandy, about the egg business at your house. I think those things are fantastic. Nothing that says, hey, look, set them up in a lawn mowing business and say, here's the deal, I'll pay for the lawnmower, but you're going to have to rent it from me, and you're going to have to buy the gasoline and go out and, teach them to advertise, go door to door. I think there's some just great lessons there. So that's a little off my, work for an outsider, because I like that, but I also, man, I've always been an entrepreneur, and if you can get that and it's a great way to work with your kids. It could be very fun.
Boy, that would be the ultimate work ethic lesson in being a self-starter. If you have a job where you're, self-employed in high school, whether it be mowing lawns or some photography gig on the side, doing those things is completely self-motivated. So you don't have a boss calling you and saying, hey, you have to come to work.
Yep. And I think there's opportunities like that. Window washing. There's a lot of things you think about what you could do. Washing people's car, walking dogs. There's a lot of things.
Yeah, even if it's seasonal, even if it's for the summer.
Yeah.
Right.
So the last couple things on the first job. So once a kid does have a job and they start getting all this money, we kind of touched on it earlier, but working with kids on a budget, probably a bank account is going to become way more important once they have a job, because they'll need a place to deposit their paycheck and things like that. The other thing it gives them an opportunity to learn about is income taxes.
Right.
Which we love. So do you guys have any thoughts or things that we think people should think about when it comes to taxes and
well, unlike my family, unless you want them to be an accountant, don't make them do their own tax returns. But I will say this, the universal thing is a kid gets a job making whatever he or she is going to make, and they get that first paycheck. I only got this. They did this wrong.
Yep.
I think every kid goes through that, and there's some great lessons in that.
Oh, you're right. And that would be such a great thing to be able to go through a paycheck with the student. It might be a good learning lesson for the parents to, you know, you can ask your Windward advisor if you want some help on that, or just Google what the Social Security part of the taxes are, and you know, the Medicare and unemployment taxes. That would be an interesting lesson for kids. So that would be really, really interesting to me, on a pay stub going through that. But one just big picture point is the way the tax laws are set up right now. If a kid is a dependent of you know, mom or dad, or you know, an adult, that if they make less than $12,000, they likely, of just earned income, so let's not get deep into if they have investment income, but just earned, they don't have to file a tax return. They just, they're below the filing requirement as it stands right now for 2020, 2021. So
right, with the exception of that being, if they're having taxes withheld, they're going to want to file to get that money back.
Which is exactly where I want to go, is that before they start a job, they're going to have to fill out a W-4 form. And most kids can request to be exempt from withholding and on federal and state. Not if you live like in Kansas City, Missouri, you need to have that 1% withheld. But most kids don't need to have withholding on their taxes. Some people just kind of let it go, and then that creates an opportunity for them to learn how a tax return works to get their withholding back. But easy little tip, sometimes people are like, oh geez, my kid's got $100 of withholding, can you file their return? It's like, oh, we can, but you're gonna have to pay us part of that refund just to file it, and they didn't even need to file it. So something to think about.
Yeah, that's a good tip. The other thing I think of when it comes to taxes and working is retirement savings, which, you know, most 16-year-olds aren't super excited to start thinking about. But I think it's really worth considering encouraging your kids to do some type of like Roth contribution.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be the maximum, but it would give them a chance to learn a lot of lessons, saving for retirement. And man, you talk about seeing the power of compounding over their lifetime. If they start at 16, would be huge.
Oh man, yeah, that is exactly it. I would love to see my kids and more kids be able to start a Roth IRA at a young age. And you know, we've had some clients who have significant income, but their kids qualify that the parents will just fund the maximum of their kids' Roth IRA. It's just part of how they want to do finances with their kids. And they are setting their kids up really, really well. And a lot of those kids now are adults. I've seen that. They're like 30 and they have these Roth IRAs with like $100,000 in them. And I am first jealous. And second, like, wow, that's amazing. But I don't think that's how Lindsay and I are going to do it. But as our son here with his job this summer, I'm thinking that through literally. Gosh, I just am like, I want to maybe do some kind of a match. I'll even do more than a 1-for-1. If he'll do something, I'll do a match of maybe 5 times that towards a Roth IRA, and I want him to be able to see it as we do it. That would be.
So you guys have heard, I think you've heard me tell the story before, but you're just way too late. So I can remember when I was in a tax class, a tax attorney was teaching a class, and he said he's so excited his wife had a new baby and he can't wait to fund the Roth IRA for the baby. And we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. To do a Roth IRA, you have to have earned income. You know, you have to have worked. And he said, no problem. His little law practice had a website, and his baby's picture was on the website. And this was back when you could do $2,000 Roth contributions. And he paid his baby a $2,000 modeling fee every year, and it went into the Roth IRA. Perfectly legal. And
I have been using our children's photos in this visual here.
Well, I need to call your kids and let them find out where's my one? I'm doing this for free, Mom. And secondly, I want a retirement plan.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. Well, I think that is about all we have for today. Please keep an eye out for part 3 of our Children and Money series. We'll be discussing young adults with money. We'll be answering your questions about the FAFSA, funding post-secondary education, our thoughts on other career paths your children could take, and much, much more. If you have any questions about anything you heard today or would like to hear more about how Windward can help you, please reach out. My email is on the screen. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Take care.